like a threat. And one of the things that can't be attacked is your self-custody Bitcoin. And one of the things that can be attacked is the ETF. Can't be exposed to that. That's my view. It's not a good idea. And by the way, that'll hit MSTR too. It'll probably hit other stuff as well.
Friends and enemies, welcome back. Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast.
Friends and enemies, welcome to the CBP. Wanna be better informed, listen to Len and Joey. Spots taken care of right off the top. Oh, Bitcoin and easy DNS media feeding the slop. It doesn't matter what topics discussed. Quality entertainment and information you can trust.
That's being planned or at least discussed. You know, we're not going to allow
entertainment and information you can trust. Send them guys some value, boost them with some stats. Bitcoin is a scarcity asset. I mean, it's just a fact. Geopolitical, national, down to the local.
Friends and enemies, welcome to a late night sip and rip. Where I'm actually not sipping anything. I just started this thing and realized I left my water bottle outside the podcast studio, so I'm not going to be sipping on anything tonight. I am also going to try and interact with the chat a little bit, but it's going to be hard for me to see it given that I'm going to be sharing a window and doing this without doing any edits or really much prep, to be honest with you. I know I usually record these in the mornings, but I've been so busy the last few days with a number of different things that I didn't have time to do it until tonight. And I thought, why not do it live since you guys seem to like it? So here we are. First, as always, or is it as always? Let me get my... There we go. This is the Zellers at Sherman and Mohawk right here in the photo. I don't know if you guys can see that. Hopefully you can. I'll try and switch back and forth here so you can see it. Anyway, this is where I got my first job. And when I started at Zellers, I was 16, maybe just about to turn 17 probably. Yeah, I was in grade 12. And I'd never had a job like that before. I had a bunch of paper routes and stuff and did odds and ends like reffing basketball, scorekeeping, stuff like that I had an opportunity to do along the way as well. But nothing really wild ever happened in my life, honestly, until I got that job. I made a lot of friends and I think matured quite a bit too. I used to work as a cashier when I first started, and then at the service desk. You can imagine what it's like doing returns, complaints, and other things for people who shop at Zellers. It's quite an interesting clientele. It's a wide variety of people. Why do I have this up? I went to Walmart today. I want to talk a bit about that. And I figured what better way to tease it than to give a little backstory on what Joey did as a kid. First, the sponsors, EasyDNS, the best place for you to buy, sell, host, transfer. Look at this, fast and secure domain name, DNS, and hosting services. Mark's got tons of stuff on his website. Cheap, safe, secure. And having worked with Mark on a few things now over the years, I can tell you that it's very easy to run a website, run a business, or do basically anything on EasyDNS. Mark's got all the tools you need. And as you can see here, trust, reputation, history, and principles key over at EasyDNS. I'm changing the ad read live. I don't know why I decided this was a good idea, but anyways, no matter what you're doing, you need a website. And so if you're going to have to get a website regardless, why not go with somebody who you trust, who we trust over at CBP, and is a guy who's been around for more than 25 years, I think at this point, not to mention the time before that, before maybe EasyDNS was his baby. Mark was still working obviously in tech and doing things that prepared him and will ultimately help you in your DNS needs and your website hosting needs. For a couple extra bucks, you get stuff like EasyMail, domain share, keeps your website safe, keeps your mailing list secure, keeps your data secure, your client's data secure, and then virtual private server options as well. Especially if you're a Bitcoiner these days, you want that stuff. BTC Pay servers becoming more popular, Nostr relays, Bitcoin nodes, all through Mark, if you like. CBP Media is the code, and you get 50% off your first round of buys over there, which we like. Bull Bitcoin is sponsor number 2. Price is like 87,000. I think I just saw before I went live. Rough way to start the podcast here, but it doesn't matter. If you're a buyer, you're a buyer at any price. If you're a seller, I don't know what to tell you, but you can do both at Bull Bitcoin. Not to mention pay your bills with the Bills platform. Non-custodial, no bullshit, no nonsense. Francis and the boys and girls are extremely focused, extremely mission oriented, and want to make sure that your Bitcoin experience is as good, as secure, and as extreme as it can be. So head over, use the code CBP, and you get, I think, half off your fees or 25% off your fees for life, which is sick. That's money that you're going to be glad you saved. Twan over at 256 Heat is the third sponsor. Can you hear the miner running? Usually for the show, I turn it down a bit just because it gets hot in here over the course of an hour and a half, but it's cold outside, the window's open, and this thing is running full blast. I doubt you can hear it. So to give you an idea of how, kind of quiet they can be, even at max capacity, this is it. Tons of stuff available with Tuan. He's selling fans right now. I saw on his Twitter feed. If you need to pick up a fan or 2 or 3 or 10, he's got your back. He'll be on the show pretty soon, actually, talking about some of the developments in his world, not just with 256 Heat, but just in home mining in general. He's an enthusiast, to say the least, a professional as far as I'm concerned. And we've heard nothing but good things about Tuan. He's done a lot of setups for people I know personally, not just through the show. And every single person who interacts with him says not only is he a super bright guy, but he's super friendly, super accommodating, and very reasonable. So very excited to have him as a sponsor. Head over to 256heat.com. Pick up your miner, your home hash rate heater today. At Walmart today, I went, my daughter needed diapers and some other stuff, so my wife and I went. They have some good deals on cereal there. I'm a sucker for a good bowl of cereal still. Every single person I saw working there was Indian. All of them. And I just want to point out that, like, if you look at the youth unemployment rate in Southern Ontario, between 15 and 24, second quarter Q2 or Q2 225, almost 17% unemployment, higher than the national average. And obviously, I don't think takes into account the number of kids who are just not looking for work because they just don't bother, or because they know it's not going to pay that much. They can't compete with cheap foreign labor on their home territory. Heard a couple of different conversations at the store. This was one in Waterdown, so a little bit away from our house, but not too far. Not in English. I don't know how you can look at this and other immigration related data and say that everything is fine. I don't have the tweets as part of the show tonight because I don't think it's fair to necessarily comment on the things that other people say about immigration that I think shows they are leaning toward what used to be an extreme position, this idea that we have to just stop immigration entirely or close. Rabideau is one, Luke Roman another. I think most people now are seeing that the rational position has always been very, very limited immigration. And we'll talk about certain immigration from certain areas next. But the idea that this is an extreme position is fading very quickly, much more quickly than I think anybody imagined it would. And it's in part because of what the president's been saying about the latest Somalian scams in Minnesota. More than $1 billion since COVID funneled to Somalian terrorist groups, governments, Somalian residents. A complete nightmare and disaster. And a scam that should have been expected. Let's listen to Trump talk about Somalia.
The people from different countries that are not friendly to us, and countries that are out of control themselves. Countries like Somalia that have virtually no government, no military, no police. All they do is go around killing each other. Then they come into our country and tell us how to run our country. We don't want them.
What are you talking about?
You got to talk up.
She said how many countries? Is there a list?
Well, I guess we gave you 19, right? There's probably more than that.
Is that what you mean when you mean third world countries, those 19?
No, I don't think they're all third world, but in many cases they are third world. They're not good countries. They're very crime-ridden countries. They're countries that don't do a good job. They're countries that don't register from the standpoint of success. And we, frankly, don't need their people coming into our country telling us what to do.
And you talk about
I'm talking about like Somalia, where you have a congressman goes around telling everybody about our Constitution, and yet she supposedly came into a country by marrying her brother. Well, if that's true, she shouldn't be a congressman, and we should throw her the hell out of our country.
So that's a harsh clip. Or is it? I don't know about the marrying the brother commentary there. I do know, though, that he is correct both directionally and in terms of his instincts as far as should we be letting a number of Somalians into the United States. I say we, it's sort of the royal we in this case. Obviously, I'm Canadian. We'll talk about Canada in a bit, but he is correct, obviously. Somalia, one of the highest crime countries on the planet, heavily, just barely governed at all. Country sort of in name only, certainly not by function or by capability. High on the gold machine gun index for people who've been listening to this show for a long time, very high on that. We see here on just a simple Google search, and Google always slants these results away from the truth, unfortunately, but even Google can't ignore this. Violent crime is widespread, kidnapping, significant risk for foreigners and locals, piracy. This is not stealing movies. Attacks against ships continue in the coastal waters of the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Aden, with pirate groups recently increasing their activity. Human trafficking, illegal roadblocks, financial crimes, weapons, tons of stuff. And this is sort of the bullshit part here, right? Weak governance, corruption, traditional justice, and instability contributing to these crimes. What about the Somalian community in Minnesota that just stole $1 billion over 5 years? Which of these 4 things is prevalent in Minnesota? Arguably none. It raises some interesting questions. Here's a list of the Minnesotans, in quotes there, from Libs of TikTok, charged so far, 75 people. Not a single, even adjacent to American, adjacent to Anglo-Saxon name. I don't know how. The reason I'm bringing this up is not because I'm, suddenly interested in Somalian culture. I'm not. I don't care. It's an inferior culture from an inferior country, an inferior part of the world. What's interesting to me and what's important to me as a father, should be important to you as a father or someone who cares about the place that they live, is all these people came over legally, it sounds like. And the problem with legal immigration from these places is that it's been framed as okay or a good idea or whatever. And clearly here we have an entire community of people who not only stole, but I would argue above and beyond these 75 people, probably work together to conceal the crime for as long as possible and the breadth and depth of the crime. I think that'll come out soon, if I had to guess. Here's Senator Tim Kaine. It seems like the Democrats have just continued to pick the most retarded people as vice presidential candidates over the last few years. Tim, Kamala after that, and then obviously Walz recently, who's in the news. I didn't pull his recent tweet, but I mean, he's a tard as well, as Trump said the other day. Crazy times we're living in here in the media. Let's listen to Tim.
Go after a criminal to the full extent of the law, but don't say that all Afghans in the United States, those who served with our military and who lost their lives and their health and their families in many ways by doing so, don't say that they're all bad. Don't say that people who come from third world countries are bad. Virginia, about 1 out of 9 of us is an immigrant, and our immigrant communities in Virginia have been an enormous source of strength to our Commonwealth and to our country, and it's wrong to target them all for the bad actions of an individual. Go after
So I have a real problem with this comment as well. Immigrant communities are not all created equal. If you look back at what came from the world wars, you have immigrants, Italian, Polish, many different kind of European, dare I say, like Judeo-Christian, countries that were already democratic or were trying to embrace democracy, that were not particularly high in violent crime, were not religious, zealots, coming over to places like Canada, the United States. And oftentimes I think Senator Kaine here, knowingly or unknowingly, I suspect unknowingly because he just doesn't look that bright to me, there's a conflation in terms between someone who immigrated here and is living off the land, or living off what I should say is the work of others immediately, and people who came during World War I and II, for example, with barely the promise of a better life, just the promise of a better opportunity. There was no free handouts for Italian, Polish, Ukrainian, whatever immigrants during the 50s and 60s, 70s, and they weren't giving away money to people by the thousands. Certainly not putting them up in hotels and giving them PS5s and things like this. Equating current immigration and current immigrants with past immigrants is insulting to me. I think should be insulting to you too if you're part of that crowd. I would even say people who came here in the 90s and 2000s should be insulted by that. And I know many of them are. I hear from a lot of you guys, many different colors, races, ethnicities, religions, countries of origin. You're sick of it. I've talked to many of you guys through the show and obviously in private as well through my personal life and some of the stuff I do outside of the podcast. I hear this all the time. This has to stop. This idea that there needs to be immigration from places where people are more likely to kill each other than they are to start a business. It has to stop. Or more likely to steal from the new home nation than they are to start a business or to graduate from high school. It has to stop. We've seen the data. Again, I didn't pull this up, but you can go look at it yourself. Several European countries now posting data. Again, because the Overton window has shifted so much in the last 8 weeks. European countries are posting data about whether or not second generation immigrants are even net economic benefit. Shocker, surprise, spoiler alert, they're not. It's not even close, actually. It's not even close. You have, decades and decades of quote unquote the best and brightest doctors and engineers, pick your meme, coming over to Europe, Canada, the United States, and just destroying the culture. And all while you're paying for it. The taxpayers are paying for it. The incumbents are paying for it. It's ridiculous. It has to stop. Somalia is in the sort of crosshairs for me because of what's going on. And I have a very strong opinion about Islam and its threat to Western civilization. I have a daughter. It's not compatible with women's rights. It's not compatible with LGBT rights. It's not compatible with the idea of Christian values or living a certain way. And by the way, I'm not afraid to say that that's a superior way of living, not because I think, quote unquote, my God is better than your God. I don't care about that. The civilizational curves of those two sets of values tells the story. It's not a debate. You can pretend it's a debate, but it says more about you than it does about me. 99% of Somalians in Somalia are Muslim, Sunni Muslim. The total Muslim population is 19 million. I mean, you can't, if you're willing to live in a place that's 100% Muslim, the likelihood that you leave and convert to a different way of life is basically zero. It's not absolutely zero, but it is basically zero. I'll also point out that we've had several waves of globalization and immigration, what I'll call immigration pull, for a number of different reasons. I already mentioned the two great wars in the 1900s. There's been others as well. As technology improved, we saw, I think, really high IQ, good people come from some of these countries who truly wanted to get out and try something different and change the life that they were leading, which included abandoning this oppressive religious idealism. I think most of those people are already out of those countries. The people coming now, in my view, and according to the data as well, are net drains on society financially and also fractious culturally just by being here. There's many examples of this. I remember in 2016 talking about no-go zones with some of my friends, and they'd never heard of it. They never thought of it. It had never occurred to them. And then my wife and I went to London in 2017, I think, 2017 or 2018. And there was places that we were told not to visit. Couldn't go out in certain places, and that the reason was always just because the people there are not going to be friendly toward tourists, right? You can make of that what you will. I'm making the inference there. And obviously now we see in places like Minnesota in the United States, Dearborn, Michigan as well, where people are calling for the death of the infantata. I don't even know what that means, but it's some stupid religious thing that these people say. There is no fix for this domestically. You have to address this a different way. And it seems to me like what's becoming popular is remigration. I don't know what that would cost in terms of, I mean, dollars and cents for sure would be an incredible burden, but manpower, does the United States have the cultural capacity for a program like that? It might. If any country does, it's them. But it's just like, how did we get here? And the answer is we got here because we pretended, like all people all over the world and all cultures were all the same. Raises two questions, obviously. You don't have to be a genius to think of these questions. The first is, if all these people are doing culturally similar things or equally valuable things, why is it that these other cultures are, complete disasters where there's nothing but crime, rape, kidnapping, and corruption, while others are building the Sistine Chapel? That's question number one. Question number two is, if all these cultures are equally valuable, then why do we need diversity? These are important questions that weren't being asked 5 years ago that suddenly everybody is asking. And they're not asking them because they want to, or they're not asking because they've gone through a period of deep introspection. People in Michigan are asking them because there's people in the streets calling for their death. Minnesotans are asking them because they've had $1 billion stolen from their coffers. There needs to be introspection from these people in these groups at some point. I don't know what's going to trigger it, but I feel like we're getting closer. In Canada, in Europe, they've imported tons of Muslims over the last little while, like an unbelievable number almost. It's just like it is almost a crime what's been asked of Europeans over the last little while. Almost a crime. This is an important number here. In 2023, immigrants from Muslim majority countries accounted for 13% of total US legal immigration, 150,000 people. The foreign-born Muslim population represents 1.1 of the total US population. I have made this challenge offline before. I think I might have said it on CBP, but I'll say it now. I challenge you to find a country that is like more than 12 or 13% Muslim that you would live in or raise kids in. There isn't one. And so if you take this 1.1% and you look at the declining birth rate among Native Americans, that includes European immigrants, it includes Indian immigrants from years ago, and even immigrants from Muslim countries years ago. The birth rates for those groups are falling precipitously, and they are being outproduced and also just being outgunned by the number of people coming over and chain migration and dependent migration and all these different things. In Canada, again, AI will do whatever it can to tell you that this is like not what's going on, but here we are in Canada, a distinct pattern with accelerating Muslim immigration over successive decades. Between 2001 and 2011, it was about 19% being Muslim, and now it's about 63% of the total Muslim population were immigrants. Those are huge numbers. And again, I feel like we have to say this now because I have a family here. I don't want to leave. I know Len and I talk about this on the show. I'm not interested in leaving because we refuse to accept that some people come here and just don't have what it takes to live in a Western society. Those, again, harsh words, but I challenge you to point to statistics or data that shows me that I'm incorrect in that assessment, because I don't see anywhere. Germany, sort of a fun experiment in this. Obviously, we talked about it, and it's been really one of the biggest factors in allowing for immigration from these places to go on basically unfettered for decades at this point. We need to bring in third world migrants to pump up GDP, raise the tax receipts, and help pay for the social safety net. Now in Germany, they're telling Germans, high income, high productivity Germans, you have to work longer because you have to pay for the migrants. Maybe not in those exact words, but you can do the math yourself. It's a mess. This is a mess everywhere. And CTV and CBC and CNN and NBC can only frame these opinions as far right for so long. I'm not an unreasonable person. I'm not a racist. I'm not a xenophobe, not any of those things. I look at the data. I look at my own community. I look at the community from which I moved a few years ago. I look at communities like Toronto, Vancouver, some of the large metropolitan areas here in Canada and the United States. I watch the videos online. I see the patterns. And until someone shows me a pattern to the contrary, I'm unwilling to change this position. I think everyone else should be too. This is the audio only version of the clip. I couldn't find it before. This is Stephen Miller, Trump aide, Trump cabinet guy. The Democrat Party is organized around one essential command: no limit of any kind can be placed on the entry of third world migrants. The failed states of the world must be allowed to empty themselves out into America, and you must pay for their every need forever. I think there is like a racist undertone to some of the comments here. Yeah, like white replacement. The thing is that even if you don't think that white replacement is the goal, it is going to be the outcome regardless. And people are naturally upset about that. I don't know that it's going to continue at a pace that needs to concern anybody. It seems to me like this is changing quite a bit. But I just want to point out Miller's comment, because on the economics side, we're seeing all over the world now, and shout to Larry Lepard for mentioning this on the Bitcoin side as well. The big print is coming. There is no way to pay for the programs that the government must pay for to prevent riots. And what they've done by bringing in third world migrants is add another fault line, add another danger, add another issue, add another welfare requirement, you pick your phrase there. But the idea that this is going to work forever it's obviously not true. So if there's a natural stopping point for this anyway, a natural limit, then we need to either know what it is, or we need to stop now before we reach it. And I think either of those positions are reasonable. The latter is the one that I think we should take for now. Let's talk about the Canada-Alberta MOU. So there's going to be a pipeline, maybe. We want to do a pipeline to the coast on the west coast of the country. You know, this is an interesting kind of political game of chess here. You know, there's comments in here and requirements in here that they have to find a private sector financer. The indigenous people have to be consulted. A number of other different things. You can look this up yourself. This is on the PM website. I find this fascinating because I actually don't think the pipeline gets built. And I'll tell you why. Here's what I see. I see Carney and Smith, who I don't think see eye to eye on energy, number one, on energy sourcing. Number two, I see two people who are at odds in terms of their political incentives. And I see Eby as more easily aligned with Carney than he is with Danielle Smith. Here's how I think this is going to look. Carney gets to say to Albertans, look, I signed the MOU. I signed off on this. I've done my part. Ottawa has cooperated with Alberta. We made some significant concessions here. We're still talking about 2050 emissions targets. We're still talking about Indigenous rights, but I signed off on it. If you guys can figure that out, the federal government will back you 100%. Great. Now he gets Alberta off his back. And he also gets the oil and gas people off his back. So that includes Ontario Conservatives probably and a few other groups that are keen on this particular portfolio. For Eby, for Smith, I should say, let's start with Danielle. For Premier Smith, she scores points with her more reasonable base, the mid-curve base of her supporting of her constituents. They want to see a cooperative Alberta work with a Ottawa that is operating, or at least appears to be operating in good faith. I think that's happening here. And it takes real steam out of the separatist movement, I think. Because now you have a government that's cooperating on your biggest issue. What other issue do you have that requires you to separate from the country? If your resources are unlocked, then that's really a significant move to halt that separatist impulse. So that's interesting. Now, Eby comes into play. I think Eby's going to be the guy who stops this. And I'll tell you why I think he's going to be the guy who stops it. Number one is he's NDP, so he has a benefit. He would benefit greatly, I think, from being able to say to his constituents, I don't care what Ottawa says. I don't care what Danielle Smith says. We are for the people. We're protecting the Indigenous rights. We're protecting the coastline. We're protecting nature. We're sticking to our climate goals. We're protecting, quote unquote, real projects. You know, are these real projects in the room with us right now? David Eby, please let me know so I can write it down. This is a big win for him to be able to say, I refused to do this, and I want Ottawa to fund and support and encourage real projects in British Columbia that make more sense for our people, more sense for our industry, more sense for our Indigenous populations, all this stuff. It's a win-win-win all the way through, and nothing has to happen. Nothing has to happen. Very rarely do you see this, but the Prime Minister, you know, to his credit, and I was talking about this with Mark a little bit, he's running what's basically a center-right platform. I cannot really argue with the themes of his platform so far. The spending, you know, Bitcoiners get upset about that, or maybe not upset. They get hyped up, I guess, maybe about more deficit, more debt, because it might be good for our bags. But I think that would have come regardless of who was prime minister. You know, I do think there is no stopping this train, as Lynn says. And as far as the social programs and stuff, I see a much less focus on in vogue social issues than I do on economic issues in the country. I applaud it. I'm cautiously optimistic. I've been cautiously optimistic. But at the end of the day, I think that the currency is really where the problem is, and the deficit's really where the problem is. And this is the case everywhere. And so whether Mark Carney is the PM, Danielle Smith is the PM, David Eby is the PM, Pierre is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just going to be like this. And it's going to get worse and worse. Let's talk about the Coinbase. I love this. The Coinbase UBI platform pilot begins in New York. $12,000 in USDC given to 160 people in New York. So I don't know how that's going to work, but payments started in September, $800 monthly plus $8,000 lump sum in November, and the program ends in February. The funds come from Coinbase's donation to a nonprofit after it shut down its philanthropy unit 2 years ago. So there you go. Some New Yorker is going to be experiencing life on the high road, living in the lap of luxury on $800 a month plus an $8,000 stipend, I guess you'd call it. I continue to believe, again, in keeping with, as I try and rip the pasties from my mouth here, in keeping with unpopular commentary tonight, I think that the problem with the people who get UBI is not the UBI itself. If you gave me $800 a month, I'd find something productive to do with it. I'd buy new equipment. I'd spend more on the podcast. We'd increase production value somehow. But if you give a guy who sits on the couch all day $800, you're going to get $800 of value that guy thinks is valuable. And I don't think that that's the answer for this. You know, we talked about Snap on this show, the Sip and Rip, but also we've talked about it for a number of months now since that payment system was halted or at least slowed down for a bit. The problem isn't necessarily the money. It's that the people who get the money don't know how to spend it. They don't know how to feed themselves in a healthy way. They don't know how to go to the gym. They don't know how to help their kids. They don't know how to do fuck all. They don't know how to do fuck all is the fact of the matter. And so you have to stop giving people who are dumb and lazy money. You have to give them work and education. And unfortunately, as is the same in the drug and abuse silo, addiction silo, pretty soon it shouldn't be their choice. Shouldn't be their choice. They should either be going to school. You can't have NEETs, not an education, education, employment, or training. Can't have that in a modern society. You need to have people working, producing, contributing, and maybe most importantly, finding a sense of purpose for themselves to avoid living in the slip, as my brother-in-law likes to say. This is a sort of gimmicky, crypto is cool, but it's not going to work because the people involved don't have what it takes. This is, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I thought I may as well add it. MSTR is down 9% after MSCI considers index removal. Let me get a good look here at the price of Bitcoin. Going to be down more than 8% tomorrow too. I'm not sure MSCI has a lot to do with that. MSCI is saying they're going to remove it from their index because they have too much Bitcoin. This is not a story I particularly care about, but it links in with this Tether and gold story. So Tether's buying tons of gold for their reserves at the same time that the S&P downgraded the Tether stablecoin and the peg to weak because of the high percentage of Bitcoin in its reserves. So, I mean, you look at all this stuff together, Tether, MSCI, and MSTR, is Tether the company with its finger in the wind? It might be. It's easy for me to say that Tether's done some things I don't like, some things I like over the years. They're kind of a mixed bag in my opinion. But the thing that I think is probably true is that they now have a sort of porous wrapper to domicile in the United States through this 21 thing. They have a lot of people who are ready to contribute to U.S. government initiatives if need be. And I think the government will be taking them up on that. And I think that they want to be viewed as stable. And part of the way they're going to do that is to not necessarily sell their Bitcoin like Jason Calcana says. That guy's a total idiot. But I think they will decrease the share of their reserves that are held in Bitcoin by buying gold. They bought more than central banks in Q3. So make of this what you will. I'm kind of looking at the page again here. Yeah, they did buy more than any central bank during Q3, any official reporting of a central bank anyways. So something to keep an eye on. That's it for tonight. No sipping, just ripping, 33 minutes and change. I will see you guys tomorrow for the flagship, 7 o'clock, same time, same place. Check you later.